Yeah, baby. Yeah. The Mac is back with another video. Hello, the initiated. My name is Marcus Nicola, and today we're checking out Smart Comp 3 by Sonible. Super excited for this one. I've been a very heavy Sonible user for many years now, so I'm very excited to see whenever they come up with something new or they create a new version of an existing product. Like in this case, as you might be able to tell, the number 3 indicates that this is indeed the third installation of Smart Comp. But what this thing is, let's go to the website to learn for ourselves. Subtitled The Spectrodynamic Compressor. Compressions shaped by intention. I like intention. Right off the bat, they do have a trial. So you can try this for 30 days, which is insane in the best possible way. And I hope a lot of manufacturers, whenever they can, would follow this model, because 30 days is a lot. I mean, that's 1/12, a bit less maybe. Well, maybe on average 1/12 of the entire year. So this is really cool. You can pick it up, use it extensively, and see whether it is for you. So this is super cool. I have nothing but praise for these type of approaches, because especially for people who don't have a lot of those extra bucks. So this really helps you find out for yourself whether this is for you or not. Smart Comp 3 is designed to support your creative intention. That's good. We want to approach things from a musical perspective. This audio compressor plugin uses intelligent algorithms to translate your signal into an intuitive map of viable compression characteristics. Already different and interesting. You achieve transparent musical results faster while keeping your workflow smooth and focused. For granular dynamics shaping, Smart Comp 3 provides all common compression controls, advanced style options, and spectral compression. Okay, so you can go down, it seems like, the algorithm avenue, or then you can hop off it and do things more traditionally, which is great. You don't really necessarily want to be locked in a certain approach. So that's very smart, but that is to be expected, to be honest. There seems to be a video here. We're not gonna spoil that for ourselves. Again, here's a trial box. So features: up your compression game. Your track knows the way. Smart Comp 3 maps it. That's cryptic. Audio compression powered by AI and a semantic approach. That's interesting. Compression is crucial to the vibe of a song, but most plugins offer plain numbers and parameters that feel disconnected from real sonic results. That is true in the sense that you kind of need to know your compressor before you get into it and start applying it. As you know, audio engineers tend to know what each compressor does and then apply them based on that. So that is true. Smart Comp 3 takes a different approach. In its dedicated compression matrix, is like Morpheus, like blue pill, red pill matrix. AI-powered analysis and automatic parametrization map an entire spectrum of musically viable compression settings based on the characteristics of your audio material. This is really cool, in principle, at the very least, because this is exactly the kind of stuff a lot of people benefit from. Of course, you still need to know, for example, in this picture, it's a snappy, dense, punchy dynamic. People don't necessarily know what those things really mean unless they've been working with audio for a while. But at least it's a better starting point than looking at numbers, which you don't understand at all. Not to say snappy, dense, and punchy and dynamic aren't clear enough, but hopefully you get what I'm saying here. By highlighting how far your signal can be dynamically shaped, it lets you explore your track's potential without the usual trial and error. So this is interesting. So it seems to give you like a territory of viability, which is interesting, cool, and I know it scares a lot of people as well, because it's like, don't tell me what to do with my compressor. Based on how they describe it, though, you can probably bypass this, I would presume, to just work with the controls as you would usually. But this is actually really cool if it works. What's new in Smart Comp? So compression matrix, this is actually good to touch on because I do have Smart Comp 2 and use it a lot. And I will also say, going from Smart Comp 1 to 2 was already a significant leap. Like, it was, I would say, a lot better. And Smart Comp already was a very good product. But with 2, I was like, oh, yeah, it works better for sure. So I'm interested in seeing, like, what is the difference from 2 to 3. But yes, compression matrix is new, displays a range of compressor settings, allows smooth transition between those characters. Compression scope visualizes the viable compression range of the analyzed signal. Okay, interesting. Group mode, nice. Links multiple plugin instances for shared control of threshold, ratio, attack, release, and mix. Enables batch adjustments from a single interface. Nice. This is potentially very powerful. I wonder how this kind of synergizes with Smart EQ 4. I don't think they are cross-synergized, but that's maybe something they could have a look at. That would be super powerful. Makes sense that they would maybe attempt to do that. Seems like technologically a difficult task, but zero latency mode, cool. Refined input writing stabilizes level variations prior to compression. Super good. Very good. Enhanced style control, updated compression engines with defined attack and release behavior, and refined saturation characteristics. Cool. Cool. Joint control of up to 7 tracks with inter-plugin communication. Accelerate complex mix workflows and ensure consistent compression across multiple tracks with Smart Comp group mode. Nice. That's going to be very interesting to see, which we are going to test as well. Styles input writing, zero latency mode. Cool. We kind of touched on that. Pricing comes in here. So importantly, I am logged in right now onto this site, I believe. Yes. So this is the price I see from my account. So to know what is the best pricing you qualify for, log into your account and check it out. So if I understand this correctly, 129 euros is probably the intro price, I would believe. And then probably the full price is a bit higher than that. But since I have Smart Comp 2, I would presume this offer is based on that. I could buy this for 29 euros. Now, I didn't have to buy it because I'm doing a demo review of it. So, ka-ching, saved 29 bucks. But I have to praise this. This is an insane, like percentage-wise, an insane offer. And this is one thing that I absolutely love about Sonible, is that they actually make the sort of like loyalty feel like loyalty when it comes to this kind of pricing stuff. Because 29 euros for upgrading from a version to a new one is like a super no-brainer. And it's super, super cheap. I mean, so yeah, I mean, nothing but praising for this model. And like I said, it really strengthens the customer company connection, because this feels like, hey, I'm actually being valued, having invested time, money into this company before. So that's super cool. But again, for what you qualify for, check your email, go to your account, and remember to register everything you own there so that you can see what you qualify for. But very cool. And also we offer a 40% EDU discount for students and lecturers. So if you're are qualified for that, pretty cool. Plugin formats: VST, VST3, AU, AAX. For Windows, VST, VST3, and AAX. No AU, understandably. Supported sample rates: 44.1 kHz to 192 kHz. Authorization: machine-based or iLok. Native Apple Silicon support. Awesome. Requirements are here: Windows 10 46-bit. Windows 10 64-bit. Jeez, long day. Mac OS 11 or higher for Mac, and RAM, you need Intel Core i5 or Apple Silicon. GPU, OpenGL version 3.2 or higher. List of tested DAWs is also there available if you want to go harder in there. This is very cool. Let's take us back to the DAW, and I'm gonna go ahead and close Chrome to save my poor computer's resources. Now, what is really cool about this plugin, the first time you open it, it doesn't actually look like this, because it looks like I'm just checking this doesn't have any information that's personal. I don't think so. It opens up with a tutorial. This is really good. Right off the bat, again, they summarize what's new: the compression matrix, group mode, zero latency. Of course, that's not everything, because they did the new compression engines as well, but smart not to put, you see what I did there? Smart not to put everything in this tiny box. Take the tour. We want to take it. SmartComp 3 makes it easy to dial in compression that serves your creative intention. Intuitively find the right settings for your material using the compression matrix, and control multiple instances from the one window using group mode. Cool. Working with the compression matrix. So move this thumb around, the green thing, to find a fitting compression result. So snappy is fast, tight compression, emphasizes crisp transients. Punchy is slower, weightier compression, emphasizes body and impact. Dynamic is light, open compression, preserves natural movement. And dense is stronger, smoothing compression, creates a glued, leveled sound. And then this green zone is the zone you can move in. This is very, very interesting. As you move the thumb in the compression matrix, do the bullet time thing, compression parameters will change. Makes sense. Any manual changes you make will also feed back into the thumb's position, the compression matrix. That's actually useful, educational potentially. Green compression scope displays how much your sample can be changed. So this is really interesting, because it kind of gives you this field, and obviously that field is based on the algorithm, the AI stuff that they've done to tell you, hey, this is the zone where this stuff works. This is a very interesting approach. Spectral compression improves spectral balance by applying frequency selective gain reduction. So this is kind of so they say, think of it like a super sensitive automatic multiband compressor. And this is something people have been asking of Sonible to do, like a multiband compressor, but it's already doing it, just in a very specific way, and in a sense at a higher level. Choose high values to retain complexity, low values for a more in-your-face sound. Okay, that's good to know. Let's try and remember that. Stabilize long-term loudness changes with automatic input level compensation for consistent compression results. Very, very useful. Create a new group or add your instance to an existing group. Okay, cool. So the way I like to actually use these groups is on a section basis. So I might take everything, at least in Smart EQ4, I like to take a verse or a chorus and group that. And then I can balance everything within that song section instead of doing like, let's say, vocals or drums like they do here. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just really prefer working that way. It just works logically and more sort of linearly. Linearly. Let's go with that. With my strange brain. Groups allow you to fully control up to 7 instances from one window. This is really, really useful to be able to move them in this field at the same time. Switch between instances by clicking on their thumbs or the names in the list below. Cool. Ooh, multi-select. Click and drag to select multiple instances. Batch change their position in the compression matrix and compression parameters for big changes in sound. How does that work? Click and drag to select multiple instances. Oh, you mean like, yeah, so okay, yeah, I get it. So you paint them, but then when you move them, do they move in sort of a like relative sync? Like, how do the positions change? That seems sketchy. We'll have to see. Okay, let's go. Cool. So, the tutorial kind of gave us the overview, but let's summarize briefly. In the top left corner, it says the name of the plugin. That's a pro tip right there. Smart Comp 3. On the left next, you see this green circle with a square around it. That is the Learn button. So you press that when you want to feed something into the compressor for a Smart Comp 3 to learn what you're doing. But before you do that, you want to press this menu here and choose the source that you're dealing with. Options are bass, electric, drums, you go drum kit, hi-hat, kick, snare, toms, guitar, acoustic, electric, keys, acoustic, electric, synth, bass, lead, pad, speech, high-low, vocals, bass, high-low, rap. Okay, interesting. And then you have some mix options for acoustic, country, electronic, funk, hip-hop, metal, pop, R&B, rock. So, good selection. It does seem a bit like there's a lot of, obviously, variety or width within each of these things. Certainly musical styles, but for example, keys, acoustic, electric, obviously, that mainly refers to the piano and the electric piano. But yeah, definitely, I mean, I wouldn't say a lot of synth sounds are sort of generalizably similar, but I presume they are still distilling some of those basic findings into the different profiles. And we are talking about compression, so it does make sense. It will give you kind of the general... obviously, in this case, it doesn't give you like, this is the compression sound, but it gives you this matrix field in the compression, or a matrix field of the styles of compression you can go for. So in that way, this makes a lot more sense. As always, as an orchestral cinematic writer, I would love to see Sonible include more like orchestral instruments. It would be wonderful. And I know a lot of composers do use a lot of Sonible stuff as well, so it would be much appreciated. I have given feedback about this earlier, I think on Smart EQ 4. But obviously they're also responding to demand, so I don't know if it's sufficient for them to go for that. But I would love that. Obviously, in this case, you probably might go with the universal. Let's say if I was dealing with strings, orchestral strings, I would probably choose universal and then probably lean heavier into the dynamic range, because that's what tends to be good for orchestral stuff. But of course, try and test for yourself. But next up, you have these different slots here from 1 to 8. So these are basically different plugin states. Copy one state to another via drag and drop. So this is a really good way to really A/B a lot of stuff side by side. I praise the living out of this because it just makes your life a lot easier. It's very common for me to snap different sections of a vocal, for example, and learn it and then compare the differences between plugin states to understand what it's trying to do and then choose the best options. A and B slotting in plugins is good, but I just love that we have so many different options here. It's really, really good. And also you could automate these states so that you can have a compressor, you can have the compressor do one thing in a verse and then do a different thing in the chorus and so forth. So that's cool. Then you can load a saved preset as well. Preset files, what does it say? Can be found under, yeah, okay. So they go depending on where your computer is putting them. Cool. On the left, you see the matrix here. Again, Neo. I don't know. I'm not going to do any matrix jokes here. But, so again, here in the green field, that would be where we can move stuff around within these borders. As you can see here, I can drag it. This is like a racing track. I bet that was by far the most annoying part of this demo, which is an achievement on its own for sure. So that's good. And you can see the parameters change here as I move this thing around here. Cool. You can see basic controls here. There's ratio on the white line, threshold. Here you can control attack. And you can also control release here if you turn auto off, but A means auto is on. And you can chew the knee. Jeez, don't chew the knee. Choose the knee by clicking here. Hard, soft, medium. Not to be overlooked, can really affect the tone of your compression quite a bit. Style, clean. Ooh. Okay, so it seems like you can just click on these. I'm trying to see if I could see them all at the same time. It doesn't seem like you can. I'm sorry if I'm missing something here on the interface, but no, I don't think so. So you got clean, smooth, aggressive, custom. Nice. So in here you have a saturation kind of curve. Okay. Let me try this. Yep. Okay. Okay, character sort of seems to make it a bit edgier. Cool. Spectral compression, you can turn it on, and then this opens the spectral view here. You can choose the range for that spectral compression. You can choose color, bright, warm, neutral, and amount. This is really useful. Amount goes to 150, interestingly, as opposed to 100. I'm sure there's a logical reason for that, but I leave it to the people at Sonible to explain why. But yeah, you turn it on and off there. Input writing on and off. Got target, amount, and mediums. So speed is fast, slow, medium, amount. Goes to 100 this time. And target, you can define there as well. Cool. And then sidechain, internal, external. Cool. On the right, we have some scopes. But this is just about it. So let us move forward from the interface. Let's do some of the basic stuff out of the way here. What is the agenda today? I just want to show you as much of Smart Comp 3 in action as I possibly can. We have drums, we have piano, we have bass, we have a synth, we have a couple of electric guitars, And what is this one thing? I think that's probably it. Yes. And then we're going to do a bit of speech as well. That's really important for me as a podcast creator. Very important. And then we're going to try and pick a few vocal examples as well. Although with my strange singing, probably not going to be the most useful example. But we're going to try and cover as much ground as we possibly can. I've prepared a mini track for you here. That is, how long is this? Just under a minute. Just something I cobbled together with a bunch of teletone instruments. Very crude. No mixing done, just a general balance. So it will actually be very interesting to see how much this can take these sounds forward. Obviously, many of these sounds are quite polished. And also, I will say that if they have compression settings going on there, I've taken them off. So this way we can hear Smart Comp 3 in action. I've tried to pull back the effects as much as I possibly can to allow this thing to shine. And also once we try the group setting here, then we can also see how much this can affect the mix balance on its own as well. So in short, the chain that you'll hear is simply the instrument in its most undressed format that I possibly can, certainly without things like compression. But anything that really colors the sound too heavily, I've taken off. And then we only have Smart Comp 3 responding to that. I do have a limiter on my master bus, but it is said to be as transparent as possible. I only have it there to basically monitor the level consistency for this video, but I will keep an eye on it at all times to make sure that it does absolutely nothing to the sound. Since we're dealing with the compressor here anyway, it's the levels are going to be good for this video anyway. I'm just using the limiter to monitor the levels for the most part and catch any sort of extreme peaks that might come because we're dealing with percussion and things like that. But that being said, it is said to be as transparent as I possibly can make it. In terms of transparency, Sonible did send me this copy, so thank you to them for doing so. Also, this video is done in collaboration with Sonible in the sense that I am being compensated for my time that it takes to check out this product. That being said, as always, all opinions are my own, both in good and bad. I haven't been asked to say anything one way or the other, nor would I ever do that. All right, so let's start with the most important instrument in the world, which is drums. And I've got Teletone Audio's Soulfy here. And again, I've pulled back all of the effects that I can, and certainly pulled back all of the compression that I can control here. So it is as undressed as I can make it. And here's what it sounds on its own without Smart Comp 3. So that's the gist of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to let's choose a slot here, go into drums and choose drum kit because that's what we are looking at. And I'm going to start playing this drum part. Let's press this learn button. It says waiting for signal. And then we're going to press play. Okay, so right off the bat, a significant tightening of the sound. We get rid of those more extreme dynamic fluctuations, like the kick is popping a bit too much without Smart Comp 3, so this kind of tucks that in nicely. I feel like I'm hearing much more of a bigger and positive impact from the Spectral stuff here. I haven't been a big Spectral user so far, because I feel like it has obviously affected the frequency balance in a certain way that I didn't find to be sort of quickly controllable. But here I can clearly hear that it's digging into that more, but it sounds a lot more natural and refined and mature than what I've heard before. We're going to test how much of that is actually coming from the compression side per se versus the specialized spectral stuff. But we'll see. Before we go into that, I want to move this green thumb around here. So right now, out of the gate, it has put us somewhere between punchy and dynamic. So it has made this green field for us here. But what I want to do is move around this field and see what kind of other tones we can find here from what it's offering us. So let's do that. That's very, very interesting. I find that definitely it has made the right call by starting between punchy and dynamic. I'd probably gravitate a bit more away from those, because this tends to make the sound sort of thicker and I was going to say denser, which is kind of weird because it's not what they define here as dense. But I mean, if we're between like punchy and dynamic, if you have a lot of dynamics, that can sort of create this sort of more of a blooming sound rather than a controlled one. So that's probably what I'm trying to mean there. But let me try and find the best balance to my taste. If I go too snappy, it gets a bit too thin there. So I'm feeling somewhere it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle here, or sort of towards the punchy sound. But let's see. Yeah, so it probably end up being somewhere there. So this is pretty much smack bang in the middle of this scope, or within that curve there. If I go too dynamic, then the drum sort of opens up a bit too much, becomes a bit too uncontrolled. So I don't want to veer too far down. Also, if I go too punchy, too dynamic, it becomes a bit unruly. So I find this to be a pretty nice balance here in the middle. So that's very, very cool. What I want to test next is the spectral stuff. So I want to hear the difference there. I'm liking this a lot. Like I said, I haven't been a big Spectral user on Smart Comp 2 because I find it sort of digs into the sound in a bit of a, what's a way to put it? It does sort of dull down a lot of things, of course, because it chews on different frequencies. But I always felt like I sort of maybe lost a bit of, what's the word? I was going to say edge, but that's not what it is. It sort of, it felt like it was sort of muting things a bit too much, but I feel I detect none of that here. This is super, super mature. Interestingly enough, if we go, well, first, let's go from 0 to 100, which seems to be the default that it offered us, but then you can go to 150, which actually, again, kind of turns it more into the snappy direction, which is really interesting. And I like this because oftentimes when it comes to mixing music, you want to have, it's pretty rare to do very large changes and shifts in your mix from just one source. So it tends to be the case that these sort of iterative, tiny changes sort of stacked on top of each other get you to the best, most refined result. It's like small shifts here and there, and together they bring you to this mature, polished end result. So that's kind of how I'm viewing this here now. I would probably do my sort of more typical compression first, or I should say I would focus on this matrix scope first, and then use the spectral stuff to kind of fine tune and hone in on the exact sound that I'm after. I understand these are working together all the time, but it's reminding me of that sort of iterative, stack of paint, so to speak, on top of old paint approach, where you just do these small changes to get where you want to go. Yeah, already there, it's considerably tighter again and more locked in. Sounds very nice. And there you begin to hear some of that even more control, some of that sort of more of a muting effect. And again, that's not a negative thing. It just means that it sort of gets a bit more enclosed. And again, we're pushing over the 100% mark there. So it's nice to hear that once you begin to move past that point, you begin to hear these sort of more emphasized effects. Yeah, at 150 compared to 100, it becomes a bit snappier, a bit thinner. Again, that's not a negative thing necessarily, depending on what you want to go for. But it does kind of like chew a bit more into your audio. And I think that gives you a lot of flexibility. At 100, it's a super, super, super nice balance there. In terms of the color, let's try these different ones. So the one we were listening to so far was neutral. Let's do bright, and I'll actually go from neutral to bright to here. Yeah, it seems like once you go past that 100 amount, you start getting into the sort of more unnatural territory. Again, that's not necessarily a good or a bad statement, but for an organic drum kit like this seems to be like the spot where you're still within sort of a natural sound. Very cool. The bright sound here seems to sort of more naturally align with the sound of the kit here. Let's do warm. That's very interesting because it does, interestingly enough, like the bright setting kind of caters to the bright top end of the kit, and obviously the warm sound caters to the kind of muted, thicker, warmer sound of the kit. You know, obviously the snare, the kick, etc. But it gives you really, really great control over this. I'm kind of like very interested by the fact that this is coming from like spectral compression rather than EQ. But I guess it makes complete sense because you kind of tell it what its bias is gonna be. What sort of sound do you want to go for? This works really, really well. And actually you can push this quite a lot because it does pair so well with the natural sound of the kit. And there to 100, it just kind of tightens it up very nicely, slightly rounds out the rough edges. And interestingly enough, here pushing beyond 100 just makes it sort of more darker, kind of in a vintage. Works super nicely. Okay, so spectral stuff sounding really, really, really nice. Liking this a lot. All right, so let's move on to the next instrument, which I believe is a piano. Yep. And this is the Teletone Audio Golden Age Grand. Now, to make this as sort of unprocessed as possible, I'm just using the Golden Age Grand preset, which is this piano in its most untouched state without any effect trickery. And this is what it sounds like. So that's the part. And we want to go into Smart Comp 3. Let's turn it on. Go into keys and choose acoustic. There we go. And press learn. I'm thinking you want to be careful about the parts you teach it. So I'm probably going to take this latter part of this track because it has a lot more low-end piano information, and that's going to be more relevant from a compression standpoint. So let's press learn and go. So just out of curiosity, I do want to relearn that part based on this earlier stuff. So this is one of the reasons why I like doing effects based on sections, especially Sonible stuff with the grouping rather than on some other basis, because again, it's going to do very different things depending on the part in question. Let's listen to this beginning part, and this is what it was learning in this plugin state. So it gives us a pretty wide slide here between snappy and dense into punchy. Interesting that it doesn't go into the dynamic direction, but let's move this thing around here. So here, if I go to punchy, it's gonna bump up the low end of the piano, all the sustain pedal noises and other stuff like that. If I go all the way to kind of a dense, snappy combination, it becomes, well, too squashed, too compressed. So I find that here within these options, I would definitely go closest to the kind of a more denser, between dense and snappy setting here. Actually take that back. I would again land on a pretty neutral zone here in the middle. Let's try the spectral side of things here. Yeah, so you definitely get a really good kind of blanket of control around it. That's an advancement. Definitely pianos can be tough because I don't usually want to like choke the natural sound of it, but it's true that they can, again, get a bit unruly. There's a bit too much resonance and kind of bulkiness and dynamics going on in different places. So this really nicely brings that under control. And what I also like about this spectral stuff is because it's essentially something between an EQ and a compressor. Obviously, it's compression happening at different frequencies, and that in many ways is can result in things that are very akin to an EQ. But I actually really like how this works, and this can take care of issues that you don't necessarily want to or can take care of with an EQ. You would probably most of the time use something like a spectral resonance controller thing or something akin to that. But it's quite nice to have this built into the compressor and have it be married to compression, because it creates I would say like a tighter, more polished result for sure. All right, next up we're going to have a look at the electric bass guitar. And again here using Teletone, this is the retrograde bass preset Bravado. So this bass guitar did have a nice bit of saturation and drive put in there, and a tad bit of compression. I took those out because those will affect your perception and the impact of the compression for sure. So I pulled those back. They sound really nice in this preset, but for the sake of demonstration and actually hearing what Smart Comp 3 does, we took those out. So here's what the bass sounds like on its own. So nice, natural sounding, snappy at the top, but warm at the bottom type of a sound. We're probably going to take this last bit here because that has the most low-end information here, and that's going to be the most relevant aspect from a compressor's point of view. How nice of us to think of the poor compressor. So choosing bass, electric, there we go. And press the learn button, turn the plugin on, and let's see what happens. Okay, so this is going to be super interesting to hear what it does. Right off the bat, I'm getting a big sensation of like control and tightness without losing the fullness of the thing. So let's start by moving, again, the thumb around this matrix here. This has sort of emphasized the snappy sound. It's probably responding to the top end snap of the bass, which makes sense. And then it kind of gives us a scope towards dense and dynamic, but not punchy. Yeah, that's the limiter blowing up there. Let me pull back that. We're not going to go into that dynamic range, dynamic direction, because it just gives us a lot of like fluctuation and room that we don't need from this bass, because otherwise it's just going to be all over the place, take up space and sounding really uncontrolled. So we're going to wander between the snappy and dense here. So I'm probably going for a snappy sound. Doesn't benefit the sound here because it's already snappy, and just accentuating that makes it a bit too excessive. So I'm leaning more towards this dense direction. There's a tad bit of limiter clipping there. It's when we push into that dense direction, it clearly lets more of that low end come through, making it bigger and juicy. The dense direction also clearly hones it in, makes it tighter. If we go to the middle, again, it becomes a bit unruly. So this is really the right direction. I actually think this extreme end mix of dense and snappy is really the best marriage here. If you go too snappy, again, that top gets accentuated, and we don't need more of that. It's clearly present there already. And if we go too much into the middle, again, we get too much of an emphasis on the low end. So this is a really nice balance of things here. Again, let's test out the Spectral stuff. Big difference. Obviously, as we pull this back, it's letting all of that low end information through, and we get this like big booming low end, which is not necessarily exactly what we're looking for when we are pairing this with a drum kit. So this very nicely takes that under control, but without sounding like we're choking it out or muting it or anything like that. It just kind of like hones it in. Yeah, this takes all of that low end, which sounds very impressive and full and big on its own, but it kind of calms down without losing the juice of it. So I'm really interested in seeing actually how this will work together in the group mode with the drum kit. But this is a really fantastic control, because this allows me to, again, control the amount of the low end here in a super easy, refined way without having to go anywhere else. Actually, one of the things that I wanted to do is I'm going to open my scope here on my interface and have a look at this without any Spectral stuff on here. So with that, we have that big build up in at 50 hertz, and then another one at 100. Let me crank this up to 100, which is maybe a bit more than I would put on the mix, although I would have to reference that to be sure. But let me see how this looks like now. Yeah, so it does quite significantly take that under control. It retains the whole balance of it, but that's very nice. Let's try some of these color settings here as well. I actually do like the bright there because it kind of pairs well with the top end of the bass. This is really nice because it really gives us that big low end, but things just become more put together and tighter. That's super nice. One of the things that I'm looking at is the style here. And I'll actually test this one. So clean, smooth, aggressive, and custom. Let's start with clean. Ooh, that's a significant difference. Sounds really cool. It somehow does like a... Let me listen to that. Yeah, significant differences here. it's like the smooth adds a tiny bit of like it. I feel like it accentuates in this case the stereo image here. It kind of does something to the right there, and then we get a tad bit of something like that saturation popping on the right, and then it's sort of more accentuated in the aggressive style. So that could be good for like if you want to go harder in the last chorus or something. So I'd probably for this track specifically go with the clean, but I like how the smooth, it makes it sort of somehow a bit slippery, more slippery. That's a very cool thing. I actually do want to, let's pop back into the drums here. Yeah, let's choose this drum kit here and let's learn this again. I want to try the different styles as well, because I feel like that's kind of necessary and fair for the compressor to do that. Cool. Yeah, this makes it a lot more versatile. Obviously, you can then go also in here and adjust the attack release stuff as well. But yeah, that's very, very useful. All right, next up we have an electric guitar. This is kind of an unruly type of a sound. It's has a lot of distortion, has a lot of delay and reverb there. So in fairness, this isn't exactly the kind of a thing I would necessarily feed to a compressor at this point, except with the exception of trying to, let's say this is exactly the sound I want to go for, and then I'm trying to fit it into a mix, then I might do something akin to this, which is what we shall attempt to do here. But as we'll probably see, this, it might not be, we're essentially testing and showcasing a very specific use case for a compressor at this point. But without Smart Comp 3, this is what the guitar part sounds like, and this is the Voyager guitar by Teletone Audio once again. that's what it sounds like. Bunch of distortion, delay, reverb, etc. So at this point, using a compressor is really just about making it fit in the mix better. But turning Smart Comp 3 on, we're going to choose guitar electric here and press learn and play this part. So again, here I'm hearing elements that I think are coming from the Spectral side of things, which looks like there's a bunch of stuff happening there. So I'm actually going to start there and reduce the Spectral stuff because I feel like it's chewing on different frequencies because we have this big blooming delayed reverby guitar sound. So it's probably trying to tackle it too much in ways that aren't actually we don't want. Yeah, even there at 50, you can begin to hear kind of like some sort of a pumping effect happening there. And that's just because the Spectral stuff is trying to, bring down everything. So again, this would be an example of where I would not use this. This Spectral stuff is really great when you're actually dealing with a kind of a more source sound level type of thing, instead of if you're trying to give it a lot of like reverb and saturation delay to chew on, you're probably going to hear some of that pumping stuff going to happen, or happening rather. But again, you could probably tweak some of this in there to control things, but it seems like that's not really what it wants to do. This definitely sounds like compression more, which makes sense because it is, instead of like, let's say me trying to control unruly frequencies from a more EQ or spectral EQ perspective. But I'll see how much I can push this. Yeah, I mean, even that would be probably a bit too much. So I would turn this off here. Let's go to the matrix. Yeah, so I'd definitely go as snappy as I can there and as further away from dense as I can. Let's try different styles here. Yeah, I would probably stay clean. Again, this would be just like light compression to control what's really happening here. Let's turn input writing actually on here. So here I would actually turn that off, or then I would need to spend more time adjusting the input writing. Cool. Let's do an on and off comparison. Definitely very useful. Again, tightens it up, tucks in some of those extreme peaks. And also I find that it even if we're not using the Spectral side of things, just the compression alone is taking care of some of those unruly frequency buildups that sort of want to become too excessive. So this is actually very, very, very useful. We have another electric guitar part here. Quite different, actually very different. So again, choose guitar electric and press learn, and this is what it sounds like. Actually sounds really, really good. I like this guitar part because it gives us that distortion hit, and hopefully when it pairs with the bass and the drums, it gives that sense of distortion, but without being like a big thing. But then we have this also this clean top end where we can kind of double this melody that this mini track has. Very interestingly, if you look at the matrix there, we have this tiny sliver of real estate from dense to snappy that it's offering us, which kind of makes sense because the sound is very scooped already, very, very specific already, very tuned very far into a very specific type of a sound. Let me do an on and off comparison. So this is off. We have a bit of a level difference here, but this is on. Yeah, so when this is off, it definitely, you can hear the unruliness of it. It's definitely far more loose all over the place. When you put this on, it tightens up super, super nicely. Gives that extra layer of control, which is very, very nice. Tucks this in, controls it very, very nicely. Let me move this matrix thing here. Yeah, so the dense side tends to, obviously we can see as the compression increases, but leads more to like a pumping type of thing. And of course, when you go to the extreme, that's exactly what it's gonna do. Well, no pumping, I shouldn't say, but you know, heavy handed compression. So let's find a good balance here. Somewhere there, a bit of that, like tucking it in, controlling it works nicely with that sound. Let's try a few different styles here. Yeah, for this track, the clean tends to work the best. And also we're dealing with sounds that are sort of already defined quite a bit in terms of their like distortive qualities or aggression. So makes sense to not go too hard here on the smart comp. Spectral stuff. Yeah, that's 90 is about like the sweet spot here for me. Sounds really good. It just kind of gives that extra layer of tucking it in. Let's try the color. I'd probably err on the side of the warm there. Kind of counterbalances some of the lightness, the brittleness of the sound itself. Anything else we want to have a look at here? I don't think so. Sounds good. Next up and last up is a synth part. And this is always interesting because compression and synths are a definitely in most cases kind of a, I would say, rare combination. Depending on what you're doing, of course, there are a lot of different electronic music genres where we use synths and compression in multiple ways. But again, what we're dealing with here is kind of like a pretty strange part, probably. It kind of starts out low and mushy and then goes higher towards the end. But let's have a listen. So here, like a very lo-fi, darker synth part. So this is probably going to be very difficult for the compressor to make sense of this. I don't know. I mean, it's already very mushy. This is coming from Oracle, from Teletone Audio as well. So I don't even know if I would add this. But again, once again, we might want to use a bit of compression to put this sound together in the mix with other elements. So might as well try go into synth. In this case, I would probably choose lead because it's again, here's like, I wish there was maybe a plucky setting, or like what's the term they usually use for this? Like polyphonic, like poly setting or something like that. So we only have bass, lead, and pad. It's not bass. It's not exactly lead. I mean, in some ways, I would probably, this does sound kind of pad-ish because it does have that kind of washy quality. But we're going to go with lead here just in the hopes that it kind of responds more to the plucky side of this thing. So let's press learn and see what happens. Probably stay closest to the snappy because it does slightly accentuate the transient side of the sound. Let's go to the spectral side here. Yeah, here, because we have that like very noisy, washy sound, so it's kind of confused as what am I supposed to do with this noise? So I wouldn't probably go down the spectral side there. Cool. Let's do a bit of an A/B here. There's definitely that, again, that tightening, bringing it forward a bit more. If we take it off, it sounds a bit too loose, a bit too smudgy. Obviously, it's a very smudgy sound, but this does bring a very nice presence to it. So it is actually a very significant improvement. Cool. Next up, let me go ahead and throw an instance of Smart Comp 3 on all of these tracks, and then we're going to group them together and we're going to see what happens then. I'm actually really excited for this because this has been super positive and promising so far. I'm especially interested in how this thing can increase mix clarity and impact, because how this is going to pair with Smart EQ 4, it's very interesting stuff. And like I said, this is an unmixed thing other than just having a general balance here. So it should give us a really good idea of what this alone can do to improve your mix. But let me go ahead and actually add all these instances on these tracks and set them to be ready to go. All right, so I've set an instance of Smart Comp 3 on all of the tracks and fine-tuned the settings a bit, more or less in the same way that we have done so far, with some minor exceptions here. Let's go ahead and add the group here. So again, in this case, since I am dealing with multiple different instruments in the same section, what I prefer to do is actually do this group processing based on the section of the song. So this way I have a group for an intro, a verse, a chorus, a bridge, whatever, outro, and that allows me to control those different instruments simultaneously within the context of the section of the song, rather than saying, oh, these are all the guitars, or these are all the drums. Of course, if I was doing like a drum kit, different parts of a drum kit, putting them together to form the sound of the drum kit, then I would do things differently. But this is like sort of like stem mixing-ish, but something you definitely should consider if you have your parts ready and you want to have them sit together better with one another. This is definitely one way to do that. So I'm just going to call this whatever, verse. And now drums have been added to verse. Now I'm going to keep this window open for you, but I'm going to go ahead and add everything else also into verse. So that was the piano. We added the bass there. This first guitar, second guitar, third guitar, and then we add the synth into the verse group as well. And that's it. Now all of them are mapped in here. And, ooh, nice. When I hover on them, they show the map in there. Cool. Also, if I had actually named my tracks in terms of drums and, well, there we go, drums, piano, bass, let's do guitar 1, G2, G3, and synth. There we go. And now when you hover on them, you actually see them there. That's super, super nice. I've also switched the processing to linear, as they say here. Use minimum for zero latency operation in live or recording setups, and linear for phase accurate processing in mixing or mastering where latency is acceptable. Nice. So when I'm looking at the group matrix here, one of the things that when you are working in Smart EQ 4, for example, is that you obviously, when you bring stuff into the group, you can learn the whole group and make things sit better with one another that way. Now, obviously, that is more of an EQ operation, but here I'm sort of like left thinking, like, could there be a compression version of that, which might be kind of a strange thing to ask, but it's just something you're left wondering because you're already familiar with the Smart EQ 4 function for that. But this is kind of like, again, the problem is that there are decisions to be made. Like, why do I have to make mixing decisions about music? But these are basically, this is just a view where you can see everything at once and move things around in case there are some colliding elements, or you're wondering if you could maybe change the sound of your drums, for example, to sit better with your bass and stuff like that. But there's a part of me that is wondering, could there be a feature where where Smart Comp 3 kind of does a take on that on your behalf? Like, how do I fit the drums with the bass from a compression standpoint? And obviously then you could tweak it further. But yeah, this format makes me wonder and think about that, whether that could be something that could be explored. Now, the thing that I've been wondering, as we said in the beginning, is how the heck does this work? So if I drag across all of these instances, I have them now selected, but what's going to happen when I drag these things? Like, how are they going to move about? So that's really strange. I don't know what I would do with that, because it does move things around in like a relative ratio, which makes sense. But I would still imagine that I'd rather be using movements of individual elements rather than as a whole. Like, moving them as a whole seems like an almost impossible thing to really map in your head. Now, obviously, you don't need to. You're supposed to just listen and hear it with your ears. But I struggle to see when I would personally use that as a feature. Because I find it difficult to believe I would be so far off from the whole thing that I would actually want to move everything to a certain direction simultaneously. And assuming that the changes I want to have on each of these instances are supposed to be like similar to one another. Obviously, this is only a feature. This is like, I'm just exploring this as like, where would I actually use that? And I don't think I ever would want to move them all at once. But again, from a feature perspective, it's nice that it gives you that option, because it's just cool to have that feature in case you want to use that and you find an actual use case for that. Of course, it's also nice I can choose just a couple of these. If I feel like I wanted to make the drums and the bass more snappy together, I could. But personally, I find myself thinking that I would think, oh, the guitars are maybe a bit too flat, or the bass is a bit too snappy, or whatever. Then I could go in there and move it around. So that's really cool. This does make me kind of yearn for a Smart EQ4 type of a feature, where I could find different compression setting pairings between elements, like some kind of automatic mix learning thing. Now, I know this is, it's kind of a strange thing to ask when it comes to compression. With EQ, it makes sense because you're trying to demask things based on the hierarchy that you've set. So you want certain things to be forward, certain things to be back. You kind of give a priority for Smart EQ4 to put things in certain places. But I can see, for example, with drums and bass, I could select those and have Smart Comp give me some sort of a starting point or an idea or different placements of, hey, do you want your drums to be dominant or your bass guitar to be dominant, and then set some kind of a pairing based on that. Of course, as we are in this matrix, essentially it does the same thing as I move things around here. It changes exactly that. But the difference is that the AI learning would be could bring something to the table that you miss yourself, depending on your skill level and so forth. But at the very least, it could be a tool of like process of exclusion. So testing like, oh, do I want the drums to be dominant versus the bass? And what is the relationship from a compression perspective that I want to have between these elements? So that's definitely something I would be interested in seeing, because this field is really cool, but it kind of like, if I feel like it's just like screaming at me that it wants a feature where it can automatically, based on certain parameters that you give, like priorities of where an instrument should be in relation to another one, that it would set some kind of a balance there. But of course, the difficulty is that compression is a lot about like the quality and the character of the sound. But I'm sure those could be sort of generalized and defined even along these four axes of snappy, dense, punchy, and dynamic to do that. Or at the very least, you could tell, make the bass this way, make the drums that way. I'm trying to think through if this makes any sense as an idea or a proposal. But I think it at least conceptually is an interesting thing to explore. All right, so let's do an A/B between all of these instances on and off. So I'm going to turn them off first. Let's find a balance for the level, or sort of rather the level for this mix here, and let's do an A/B. Yeah, well, it's pretty clear an immense amount of controlling a lot of like the loose elements and the frequency fluctuations. Again, let's do off. See that same part, turn all of the smart comps on. Once again, let's turn everything off. Again, we have a lot of like unruliness in a lot of frequencies. We get a lot of like that low end boominess that needs to be controlled, but then a lot of like low mid mushiness as well. A lot of like creates this kind of boxy round sound. Again, this is smart comp instances on. Things become tighter. A lot of those frequency issues are also taken care of, which is what I really love about this, because yeah, you should EQ your instruments as well, but this spectral component here gives you that additional layer of balance, of like polish and what's the word that I'm looking for here? Yeah, balance and polish. I can't really probably put it any better than that. So again, this is without the instances. Obviously, the drums are a bit too loud there. So, but yeah, let's turn on Smart Comp instances again. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn those, turn down the drums themselves as well. Something like that. And then turn Smart Comp on. Cool. So yeah, very drastic improvement. Not only do we get the typical things out of compression, like a bit more, transient snappiness, bit more impact, bit more body, but also tightening things in a very nice, mature way, and then kind of doing like a final pass almost. Obviously, we haven't done any EQ on these, but the way the spectral compression stuff works, it kind of does like this smoothing of the frequency profile of the sound, which is super, super nice. One thing that I also want to do here is I'm going to add a Smart Comp instance on the master bus. And I want to run this whole thing through that. So let me change that for you here. There we go. And choose from here, from the mix things, try and choose something that is closest to this. I'm guessing, well, rock is really not the right, pop, it's going to have to be pop, right? Because it depends on the rock. I mean, this could pass as like some very light indie rock thing, I guess. But let's choose pop. Let's see what happens. There's only one way to find out. Here we are obviously hearing the tambourine turning into a bit of an issue, so we'd have to jump in back into the drums and pull back the tambourine. Let's actually see. Yeah. Is it this one? Percussion 1, I think so. Yep, there it is. So pulled that down a bit. Let's do an A-B on this full mix thing. Definitely tightens up things quite nicely. It's a bit heavier handed than I would probably end up with, but not a bad starting point for sure. Let's try moving in this matrix here. Yeah, as we move into that denser sound, you will begin to hear more of that pumping happening. So I would probably stay as much in the middle as I can. Style-wise, probably going to go with a clean one here again. Spectral, let's see what happens here. Somewhere around 70 gives you a nice bit of control there without starting to hear some of that more aggressive bite on the sound itself. I feel like the warm sort of nicely counters a lot of the brightness here in the thing. Again, this is kind of accentuating how we would actually want to EQ a bunch of stuff here as well. But that's still a nice way of discovering the effects of these different controls or the impact of them. The input writing is actually really, really useful control. Really, really nice. Cool. I think we'll move on to, let's do actually a final A-B on the full mix here. Yeah, drastic improvement. Cool, very nice. We'll do some voice testing on Smart Comp 3 as a last bit to cover stuff like podcasting and things like that. All right, so we're back in Studio One in another session. This is from a podcast voice recording that I recently did, and I actually did use Smart Comp 2 for compression for this voice. So what I'm going to simply do here is I'm going to bypass Smart Comp 2. We're going to use Smart Comp 3 instead choose speech low here and press learn, and let's see what happens. What you talked about is there is no choice that is not difficult, because yeah, you can listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this. Okay. Bypass Smart Comp 3. Let's go to Smart Comp 2. No choice that is not difficult, because yeah, you can listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start. And all right, and Smart Comp 3. No choice that is not difficult, because yeah, you can listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like so definitely Smart Comp 3 out of the gate, going for sort of a grainier, grittier, more saturated sound. So I'm going to move around this matrix thing here once again. No choice that is not difficult, because yeah, you can listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this is difficult. And it's like, yeah, it's any path you take, there's always difficulty with that path. It doesn't matter what you do. Like if you go to a soul-sucking job from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, if you're in Korea, apparently, then because you have different working hours. So I would definitely go for more dynamic sound, because if a podcast sound is more heavily compressed, that can get pretty tiring on the ear. So probably end up somewhere there. Also style-wise, we can try a couple of things. No choice that is not difficult, because yeah, you can listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this is difficult. And it's like, yeah, it's any path you take, there's always difficulty with that path. It doesn't matter what you do. Like cool. I actually do like the aggressive sound here. Here it accentuates too much of the saturation, the grit. But if I did the vocal processing slightly differently, that could also work really well for a voice. Spectral side. Listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this is difficult. And it's like, yeah, it's any path you take, there's always difficulty with that path. It doesn't matter what you do. Like again, here, when we're dealing with a spoken voice thing, we kind of want to hear a voice in a pretty natural state. So we don't want to have it be too, you know, tweaked or, you know, processed too much. So I'd probably in a spoken word thing use this maybe to iron out some of the unevenness in the frequency spectrum, if there is any. In this case, I would not use that, because it just introduces unnecessary unnaturalness to the sound. But useful to have if you don't do. Obviously, we have a lot of other plugins here working as well. So, but let's do input writing. Listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this is difficult. And it's like, yeah, it's any path you take, there's always difficulty with that path. It doesn't matter what you do. Like if you go to a soul-sucking job from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, if you're in Korea, apparently. That's actually really nice. It does even out a lot of the fluctuations. Again, here, whether it's better or not, I mean, it's definitely more natural if we don't go harder on that, but very useful feature to have. Listen to, you know, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this is difficult. And it's like, yeah, it's because you might, for a podcast voice thing, you might want to preserve that natural dynamic in there. Of course, we have compression on here as well, so not so natural in that sense. But yeah, I really love the fact that the input writing is here. It's really, really useful feature. Cool. I want to do one last A/B comparing 3 and 2. Listen to, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this is Smart Comp 2. Listen to, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this. And 3 again. Listen to, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard. That's a really, really big improvement. At first, I was erring on the side of Smart Comp 2 out of the gate, but after we tweaked some of these settings, I really like Smart Comp 3 a lot better here. 2 is definitely coming across now sort of bigger and boomier and thicker, but not in a desirable way, whereas Smart Comp 3 much more refined, brought under control. Very nice. Let's do one more A/B. So first, Smart Comp 2. Listen to, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this. And 3. Listen to, your speech right now and someone gets inspired and they start and they realize, holy shit, like this is hard also. Like this is difficult. And it's yeah, much more natural, again, in a good way, tucked in, polished, mature sounding. Very nice. Yeah, this matrix thing is super nice because it's a very fast way of moving between the most essential compression settings. And the thing is, like, you are, of course, altering multiple different controls simultaneously because unless you have some kind of a hardware controller or you assign some knobs to things, it's and even if you do that, it's still impossible to still have as much simultaneous kind of synchronized control over parameters in the way that this matrix can do. So this is a really fast way of finding the thing that you're looking for, finding the kind of a sound and balance that you're looking for. So that it is, I'm now realizing that I've, throughout the whole demo here, taken it far more as granted, like obvious as than it should have been. Because again, getting to testing all these kind of different results, there's no faster way to do this than this one. Again, the other option is that you are at least a semi-experienced audio engineer. You know your compressors, you know their sound, you know what they do, you know the source you're dealing with, which is another thing. So me as myself, I know my voice pretty well at this point. And let's say I recorded a certain drum kit and a certain drummer or a certain guitar player with a certain guitar. Then you can build this inner bank of, oh yeah, I'm going to use this compressor with this settings, going for this type of a sound for X, Y, and Z reasons. Whereas here, I don't need to really know any of those things. I can have any kind of a source and then explore these different options and possibilities super rapidly, like within seconds versus at the very least minutes, but probably like tens of minutes, if not more. So that's really, really, really cool. So yeah, all in all, I'm extremely impressed by this. What I'm very happy to report, again, is that anytime Sonible releases a new version of a plugin, it's a considerable step up. And what really makes it so absurd and cool is that the plugins are already really good. Like I've been using Smart Comp 2 extensively for a long time. So to have something that's already in your toolkit and be like, yeah, this is really good, this is the shit, and then you get a new version and you're like, it really does leave it behind quite considerably. So it just ups your game very, very considerably. Yeah, I mean, to kind of summarize this, again, the Matrix is just a really superb way to really quickly find the type of compression that you're looking for. Because otherwise, this process will take, at best, like tens of minutes to discover the thing that you want to go for, if you're dealing with a sound source that you're not hyper familiar with. And again, you can imagine how difficult it is to play with threshold and ratio simultaneously, and attack controls. I mean, virtually impossible to tweak 3 knobs at the same time, and more. So it's extremely cool, because it kind of bypasses all of this tweakaroonie stuff, and you just focus on finding the sound that you are after. Spectral compression, I feel like this has been a significant step up for me. There's far less of this kind of muting effect on the sound. It doesn't feel like it's choking and kind of submerging the sound as much as I felt like Smart Comp 2 was doing. So very nice. It's like an additional polish layer. It doesn't replace your EQ, but it does give you this additional sort of, not post compression, but sort of maybe intra compressional layer of just kind of fine tuning the frequency balance within this compression process into something more polished. And again, you kind of need to know what you're going to feed it, because if you're giving it, I feel like it really does best when you're dealing with just the source sound and not like additional layers of reverb and delay and distortion and stuff like that, because it will try and understand what it's listening to. And if you have a lot of like thick elements in your audio, then it can sort of like try and do too many things and kind of like, jank out. I don't know if that's even a word, but we're going to go with that. So yeah, if you're dealing with a drum kit, then it kind of understands, oh, this is drum kit, or, this is a specific instrument, instead of like a very far produced, denser sound. But in those cases also, you can go in there and add a tad bit of it, just to control things. But I feel like it really is at its best when it's dealing with the source, a clear source sound itself. I did like the styles quite a bit. The smooth one has like a tad bit of added saturation grit to it, and the aggressive is considerably more gritty. But they all sound really nice. Again, this kind of depends on what you're trying to do. Here in the demo, we were sort of looking at Smart Comp 3 from a more like mix balancing element, rather than, hey, this is going to be something that really changes and defines the sound of the instrument. So in that case, like clean is what you would probably go for in most cases. I love the input writing feature. Again, this really depends on the source sound that you're dealing with. But if you have some unruliness there and you just want to sort of tuck it in a bit more, it is really good to have this in here. A fantastic inclusion, in fact, to give you control of that within the plugin without having to do a third-party plugin there. Again, the grouping thing is really cool. Like I said, when I'm in the Matrix, it sounds so weird to say each time, Neo. When I'm in the Matrix and see all the instances, it kind of beckons at me, or to me. I don't know what the preposition is supposed to be there, but it kind of like makes me think that there should be a function where, because now when you're learning, let's say, a drum kit with Smart Comp 3, it learns that drum kit. But what if I want to learn the bass in relation to the drum kit from like a compression perspective. And now it absolutely does, in a sense, offer you the ability to balance those with one another from a compression perspective, because you can just move them around here in the matrix. I can take my drum kit into a more snappy direction and then take my bass into a more punchy one. But to have some of like the AI algorithm added benefit of like, hey, give me a starting point, or give me an idea, give me your idea of a good balance here. If I want to, obviously it will require some prioritization in terms of, hey, emphasize the drums versus the bass, or like make the drums snappy, make the bass punchy, and then it would find like a pre-made position for that. I think a lot of people would find utility in that, because again, if you're a beginner, there's certainly a lot of utility in that. Even if you're like a semi-hobbyist, there's also utility in that, at the very least from the perspective of giving you a starting point, giving you like, hey, here's an idea, and then it's just faster to move onwards from there. But I understand it is a difficult thing to probably offer, because so many of these calls are subjective to a degree, and then to ask the algorithm to sort of be able to decipher that, I'm sure there's a way to do it. I mean, I don't feel like they are very far away from that. But yeah, something like, obviously in Smart EQ4, you have this, basically you give it a priority of where instruments should be, you know, what's forward, what's backward, backwards, yes, in the foreground or the background, and then it does basically EQ choices based on that, and, you know, unmasking and those kind of things. So maybe something similar from a compression point of view could be done as well here. But there are so many like subjective elements to that I don't know how much of that is possible. But when I'm looking at this, it's just coming from a Smart EQ4 place. It's just what I'm thinking and kind of yearning for. I'm like, oh, this should be in here. Like, I feel like that. But again, once again, we in a sense already have that, because you can just move these dots. If we had a group here, we just have one voice here, but we could move these dots in relation to one another super fast and test those things. And to be honest, that's of course the better solution. It's the solution you want to end up in or with, because you should be making those choices yourself. And it is super fast, but it would also be for those who are kind of starting out or insecure, or want to have just like give me a starting point. Because again, that can be, once we have a reference point, then we know if we want to have that or more of it or less of it, and then go from there. So that's what I'm left thinking. In terms of the profiles here, I feel like it would be, again, useful to have more. Obviously, the thing that's important to understand about these different profiles for these different instruments is that you can, even if you're using something that's not in here, you can think about what is it closest to, and then use that as a reference, or you can use the universal setting as well. But again, as an orchestral guy, I would love to have orchestral profiles for strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion also, although we do have the drum kit, which is kind of maybe the closest in a general sense, depending on what instrument from the orchestral percussion world you're using. But it does feel like it's a bit tight, the offering here. So I would love to have more. Definitely in the synth department, again, like a poly profile would be cool. Something like that. But then again, you could use the the key electric element for that, for sure. So you might have to be a bit, creative in terms of choosing a point of reference, or then just use the universal one. But yeah, more of these would be useful for sure. And same goes for the mix profiles, because we definitely more depth to these would be super, super nice. But cool. I think that's it for this video. A very, very nice and very, very worthwhile upgrade, and especially if you own Smart Comp 2 or other Sonible plugins. Again, go to your account on the Sonible website. Make sure you've actually put all of your stuff in there so you can see what kind of upgrade prices you qualify for, and you know, see what is the best price you can get for this. Because like I said, like for me, this would have cost $29, which is like borderline free, dare I say. So very very, very great pricing model that appreciates their existing customer base. So go check out what you qualify for. And I'm sure many of you already have this, so let me know what you think of Smart Comp 3. And as always, let me know what you think of this video. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Finished.